loved hearing
It's
about
fine.
Diana Wynne Jones and how she was like, yeah, I think I was the bane of his existence because I kept showing up to his lecture. Like he was purposely really boring, but I still wanted to hear him talk. And when I read The Hobbit, it really reminds me of reading like Howl's Moving Castle. And I can see like how she was influenced by him directly, like much more than like I know there's people that try to rip off Tolkien, but you can see where she was clearly actually like taught by him when you look at how she like sets up a story. So that's been really fun for me when I've been going through this.
Hi, I'm Robert.
Hi, I'm Amy.
I'm Evie.
And I'm Evelyn. And we're talking about it. We're going to figure out that beginning at some point, guys. But hi. Welcome to another episode. Quick announcement off the top. We're changing up the format a little bit about how we do the episodes to try to make it go more smoothly since we have some more hosts for this section. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and so do we. So Dad, what is the chapter title for this one? We're talking about chapter 2.
Chapter 2, it's roast mutton. Does everyone know what mutton is?
No.
Sheep.
I think it's sheep,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
sheep.
And it's usually
It's different than lamb.
It's usually like the hindquarters too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's considered different than lamb. It's like a different cut kind of thing.
Is it
It's
like
okay.
considered to be like cheaper than lamb? Like a cheaper
Yeah.
cut than that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really tough. Or I find it
Gotcha.
really tough.
yeah.
But I can no longer eat sheep or lamb because apparently I'm allergic. Because,
Impressive.
yeah. Who knew?
I like lamb. I think they're cute. They're just little buddies.
And,
They are very
and they
cute.
taste delicious with mint jelly.
We're gonna move along.
In this audio format, I just rolled my eyes. So you guys were trying to do some predictions for this chapter. I don't know if we got very specific, but do you guys remember kind of what you said at all? What you thought about for this chapter?
My prediction is that they're gonna start their adventure and nothing is going to go wrong. It's all gonna be great and smooth, and it's just gonna be over real soon. And all they're gonna do is stop for tea and food.
All right. Points for you. No.
Way to go, teacher's pet. I think my prediction was also similar that they were going to start their journey. And it seemed like they would eat meals.
Yeah.
Food seems to be
All
a
right.
vibe for this book.
It does make me a
Yeah.
little hungry, not gonna lie.
Yeah, there's some good meals described, especially at the beginning of this book.
I've had conversations with Matt, not to derail this entire conversation, that Hobbit smoke is Hobbit weed, and that's the reason why they just spend the whole book very confused and eating a lot. So
It is called a type of weed in the book. In the Lord of the Rings,
It's called pipeweed.
yeah, it's called pipeweed. And in the Lord of the Rings appendices, he actually goes into a whole history about it, and we did not cover that because we just didn't find it that interesting. But
Matt told me
Should
he
we
wasn't
make
sure if
Wait,
like
should we make
Tolkien.
that a special 420 episode?
Matt told me he wasn't sure if Tolkien really understood the concept of weed, but like based off like Gandalf's inability to really like be on it, he thinks that apparently he smokes less in Lord of the Rings, according to Matt. I cannot confirm or deny that, and he says like he learned his lesson with the Hobbit. So
I thought that because he becomes Gandalf the White doesn't imbibe in anything
he's more sober.
inappropriate. Yeah. But Gandalf the Gray, who he is at the beginning, is like he's more fun, basically.
yeah,
He's the guy you'd invite to a party. Gandalf the White is the guy
yeah.
who shuts down the party.
Yeah, just to try to wrap up the rabbit hole, something that we kind of determined in our Lord of the Rings coverage was Gandalf. So the background with Gandalf is he was actually originally offered the white role over Sauron. He
Oh.
with the powers that be, they wanted him to be the leader of the wizards. But Gandalf is like, he is very like anti-responsibility and like
Sounds like
anti-drama.
they stole this from Dumbledore. Like, doesn't Dumbledore get offered the Minister of Magic at some point? Like, it sounds like
Yeah.
Tolkien kind of ripped that off of Harry Potter.
Maybe JK ripped it off of JRR.
What is JRR?
Just,
Okay, never mind. My ADHD is taking over. I've been trying to figure out what Tolkien's full name is.
it's fine.
Well, it's funny because
I mean, Dumbledore refused it because he didn't trust himself. Gandalf's like, nah, I just want to hang with these short people.
well,
Smoke
also
weed, I can't
what's
pass the
funny,
drug test.
I
But that's why like no one else knows about the hobbits except for Gandalf, because Gandalf's like, these little guys are fun and easy to frighten.
something that's also funny. I cannot remember the actor's name who first played Dumbledore,
Oh, the guy before Michael Gambon.
but he and the actor that played Gandalf would get confused on the street. They would, I mean,
Yeah, people would confuse
people would
them.
confuse them. Yes, and the actor that played Dumbledore sometimes he goes, "Oh yeah, I played Gandalf.
Yeah.
Not in the movie, but I played Gandalf."
I heard Daniel Radcliffe used to sign stuff for Elijah Wood because people are always mixing
Yes.
them up.
Yes,
I did hear
That's
that
one of my
too.
favorite ones.
Yep.
Yeah, he just doesn't argue with people anymore. He just does it. It's beautiful. But yes, Gandalf, he's very like, he's like, I did my responsibility. I want to like enjoy, like, I'm taking a break. I don't want to have to deal with all of this. And when he becomes Gandalf the White, it's more like great responsibility. And he hates it.
I just wanted to go through something really quickly. It doesn't really have any place to go in this chapter or even the next chapter, but it's kind of just interesting.
All right, let's get our rabbit holes out the way.
So, so Tolkien himself had a fondness for drawing green dragons as a kid.
Okay.
And even when he was a boy, he tried to write a story about green dragons. And this we know this because in his collection of letters, it's letter number 163 to W.H. Arden. He says the only thing he remembers from that, though, is that his mom telling him it's not a green great dragon, it's a great green dragon. And he says, and he's always remembered that and made sure he always got that in order as a writer. But that's why we have the green dragon in.
Right, that's mentioned.
Because he's still able to get that in there.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, part of our new format is we're just going to do a quick summary and then we're going to talk about parts in the book. So Abby, you want to take it away?
Yes, and I will try and do this as quickly as possible, assuming you guys did your homework and read. The chapter starts off with Bilbo waking up and his house is trashed. None of the dwarfs are there, and he's realizing he's going to have to clean, which, blows. So he's kind of pissed off that he's left to clean, but he's relieved that the dwarves have left and not taken him on the adventure. But then he kind of feels bummed because there is a part of him that wants to go on an adventure. He starts cleaning and he gets into his second breakfast. Gandalf shows up and he's like, dude, you're going to be late. What are you doing? And he's like, what are you talking about? And then you find out the dwarves actually did leave a letter and thanked him for his hospitality. So he rushes off. He forgets everything that he's supposed to pack at home. He meets the dwarves. They're like, awesome, dude, we're going to go on our way. Gandalf ends up joining him and brings Bilbo some of his stuff. They start their journey. I think they've been traveling for, I don't know if it's a couple of weeks or a couple of months. I can't remember. But they run out of food.
Approximately 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, so 2 to 3 weeks. They run out of food. I think it starts raining, I want to say. They're trying to start a fire. They're having difficulty with the fire. And then they see that there is a fire kind of like up the hill or up the mountain or whatever. They send Bilbo because hobbits can walk really quietly, which is why they think he's like a good burglar. And so he goes up, proceeds to get captured, And then this is where the D&D aspect comes in, and every single dwarf proceeds to get captured afterwards. Gandalf's nowhere to be found. He left them literally for 5 minutes, and all of them get captured. Gandalf comes in and saves all of them. And then they go and they raid a cave, and they get a bunch of really cool swords, which is really convenient for them. Then they bury some of the treasure, and then they continue on their way towards going towards the mountain. Does that work for a summary?
Yeah, that was
That works
perfect.
for me.
Yay. Yeah. So we had a few bullet points to talk about.
Well,
Looks like you had one right off the bat.
I just think it's hilarious that the house is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
When after the first meal, they cleaned everything up, but this one they just left it.
I never thought about that.
I think it's
That's
rude.
so annoying. Yeah.
Poor Bilbo.
But then again,
like,
they probably had to
he wrote
clean
the
in order to
whole
cook
book.
again.
Yeah, it is kind of odd because they made such a big point of, not of actually like not smashing the plates and not doing all of the things that Bilbo Baggins hates.
I assume they're
Yeah.
hungover in the morning and they just don't want to clean.
They partied too hard.
Yeah, or because they cook, they're like, okay, the person who didn't cook gets to clean.
Yeah, maybe this is Bilbo's fault because he didn't clean the first time. I didn't think of it that way. That makes me like the dwarves.
But does that mean they left Gandalf with all the cleaning?
Gandalf wasn't
Because
going
he
to clean
stays in the
ever.
house when Bilbo leaves.
Actually, I do have a question about Gandalf's ability for magic. Did he not learn a single like cleaning spell, or does he only know like Wizard High?
I know because
well,
in D&D that's a cantrip.
Like, I feel like Gandalf does know it. He just doesn't want to use it. But can't imagine that Gandalf didn't clean up after Bilbo darted out.
Bilbo
Can't
had to
imagine
clean the whole place. He cleaned it, and he left his second breakfast, so it is possible he cleaned up the second breakfast.
But he didn't dust. Which apparently Hobbits do.
You had to cut. Well, you have to cut some corners.
Yeah. But yeah, just talking about that, like that was kind of my first bullet point, was talking about like Bilbo and how he's handling the start of the journey so far. Because I find it really interesting that he acts on impulse for like the first time in his life, which is very un-Hobbit like. And he forgets everything, but Gandalf does give him stuff. And the start of the journey is like kind of pleasant, and it slowly just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, I don't know how many of
the
these people have been exploring based off like the start of their journey. They do not seem like professionals to me.
Well, also what's interesting is so I've used this book, so I'm doing spiritual direction, especially with men, and I love how this starts out because they're all individuals. They're only caring about themselves right now. They're all, there's no teamwork. There's no worried about your fellow traveler. So, I just think it's interesting, and that grows throughout the book, where they become closer, and especially Bilbo grows up.
Yeah. Well, the first half a day when Bilbo has nothing, they do lend him stuff at least. But the worst of it and the stain stuff.
Yeah.
I
got this hole. I got this hat with a hole in it. You can have it.
I was gonna say, I think the book is very like whimsical. Like it's very like vibes, and just kind of like it reminds me in D&D in the sense of like, you meet a random party, and like I know I'm saying it reminds me of D&D. D&D ripped off their entire thing off Tolkien. But like it's interesting seeing, because like I think with like I associate like Lord of the Rings much more with like very seriousness and like fighting and war and all this crazy stuff, but they're just kind of going on a journey to like take their stuff back from a dragon, and it has that aspect of like getting to know like the people that you're traveling with, and then like stopping when you need food and you need to like get stuff done.
Side
yeah,
quotes.
it's cute,
and
yeah, it's funny too. I appreciate how funny the story is.
Yeah, I know I mentioned it in the previous episode, but yeah, it's so. I mean, I think it's fun reading this after Lord of the Rings, even though I've read The Hobbit before. But it's definitely very much a kid's book. It's a kid's book. It's meant to be a kid's book, where Lord of the Rings was definitely meant to be darker and more serious. And I think, at least for me, that might have been why it was like so jarring going from reading The Hobbit to trying to read The Lord of the Rings, where it took me almost 30 years to read it. And I can see that with like other people who might be struggling to read Lord of the Rings, where The Hobbit might be a little bit more their speed since it's not quite as serious and dark.
They're also like,
Also, yeah, also what all of us read is basically the 1967 edit as well. Before the 1967 edit, there was a lot of talking to the child. It's like,
Okay.
well, that's pretty crazy, don't you think?
Well,
Yeah,
And you kind of get that a little bit like with the first chapter too, of him kind of like explaining what a hobbit is and kind of like doing that thing. And there is a lot less of it happening in this chapter, I think. But maybe I wonder if you can attribute that to like partially like world building too, and trying to build it as being more approachable. But I agree, there is a lot of whimsy. There's a lot of ease with like the understanding of it as well.
I think he's also like, because I've tried reading Lord of the Rings before. I think he's doing much more like he's telling you a story that you would be like listening to at a campfire or before bed versus like reading you an encyclopedia or like a textbook.
Yeah.
Like that can kind of take me out when I read some of his other stuff where it like gets really technical about like language and I'm using this word, but really it could be this. And like, like the little, not that that's not fun, but like it's, I prefer the storytelling techniques, I think, so far at least.
Oh, for sure. Because chapter 2 in Lord of the Rings is a chapter that's 3 times longer than the average chapter right off the bat, with just pure information dump. And that was very hard to get through until I finally sat down and did this podcast. And then chapter 11, I will never forgive or forget, is the Council of Elrond, where it is 5 different characters who, while doing an info dump and not saying who's speaking sometimes, while they're also quoting 11 other people who are not even in the room, that is the hardest chapter. So I like the whimsy and the little bit lighter.
What did you guys think of it's the trolls, right? Like what did you guys think of them their wonderful attempts at figuring out what was going on with the trolls? Because like that's probably what we should go into next.
It's exactly what you said. They are so unprepared.
Yep.
And okay, they just were rolling all nat ones just to keep on the D&D analogy. Nat 1 on perception, nat 1 on trying to fight.
Did not one person think, hey, maybe I should go at a different angle? Like, don't they all come out of the exact same spot?
Exact same spot. Right. And it's interesting too because Tolkien uses this again to make sure you know whose names the names are. I mean, it's almost a roll call as they come crawling out.
Right.
And also, I just had a little something I wanted to add about names there too. So all of the names derive from the Old Norse poem Voluspa, which is the prophecy of the seers. Every single elf name, every single dwarf name is in that poem, including Gandalf.
Right. And we talked about that more in the last chapter too. Last episode. But yeah, it's always fun to see where he gets his inspiration. But I love how Thorin.
Oh, sorry. I had something to add because, we're talking about like the dwarves rolling a nat 1 for all of this too. But I think it's also like demonstrating how like, I don't think any of them have ever actually been on a quest, right? Like aren't they all quite young too? And out of all of them, I think it's like Thorin what like maybe has been on a quest, but Gandalf is probably the most practiced out of all of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Because Yeah, because I was gonna say, like with Thorin, it's not until he's by himself that he's like, something's amiss. Um, where he's finally like, oh, something might be up. Because we definitely mentioned last time, but I'll mention it again this time too, that a majority of the dwarves are incredibly young, and all but three of them were born after the dragon originally came to their ancestral home. And Thorn is the only one old enough to even remember the attack because the other two were infants.
Right. And if I remember right, all they have been able to do is like basically mine coal.
Right. Yeah, that's something that we learned in the last chapter too, is in Erebor, where they're from, they were able to specialize and do stuff, but they've been trying to just survive at this point. And so that's something you kind of see with when you see like knights and such in mythology, is these are more wealthier people that can just dedicate their time to learning how to fight and do war, compared to the other poorer people that they have to farm and do everything because they have to survive. And that is a really good point to make, is that they're very young and they didn't even have the opportunity to get the kind of skills that they would require at this point.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Always. Believe
Because
I
again, I
it's
know
fine.
very little about Lord of the Rings. When I was first reading it and they were mentioning trolls, I couldn't remember if it's like the same thing as goblins or whatever the like really creepy, potentially racist thing is in Lord of the Rings. So like I was just wondering if you
Oh,
guys know the like descriptor, like what's this what are
So the
trolls significance of in Tolkien, I guess.
well, yeah.
hmm.
So Tolkien completely changes the trolls up between this because
Yes.
trolls are basically, evil incarnate. They're so evil they don't have a language even to them each other.
Or
They
they or yeah,
yeah,
they
they don't.
just make sounds
Yeah,
versus
So it
this
is
book.
trolls. Is it trolls in Lord? Because like they can talk in this one and they turn to like stone. I think this turning to stone
Yeah.
thing is still in the other ones, but like I couldn't. I was just having because it's different from what I remember from the movies. So like I couldn't quite figure out
Yeah.
like how these exist, if they're based off the Norse trolls, how big they are.
Yeah, no. So, or well, I'll just to kind of give a quick definition. So, goblins and orcs are basically different subspecies of each other, where goblins are basically smaller orcs, and orcs are more designed to be fighters rather than the goblins are kind of more workforce, versus trolls are a completely different species compared to, so the orcs and the goblin, so the orcs and then the goblins are meant to be the antithesis to the elves. They're supposed to be like corrupted elves kind of thing that the evil entities do, versus the trolls, they just are evil. But yeah,
and also
Tolkien
the
does
trolls.
completely change it from The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings. And they throw in a small explanation in The Lord of the Rings about the stone thing, where the volcano in Mordor is creating so much smoke and blocking out the sun so that the trolls can move during the daytime.
Well, it's not just the trolls either.
Well, the orcs and the goblins
Oh.
do not like sunlight either.
Right. Also, yeah, and then another thing about the trolls. So he actually in Lord of the Rings he actually calls them cave trolls,
Mhm.
not just plain trolls.
Right, where these are more hill trolls,
Yeah.
is what's described here.
And this is, and earlier when I was talking about the talking to the children part, this is the only talking to the children part that's left in this book after this 1967 edit. Because he talks about, yes, these trolls are behaving badly, and only for one head you'd be surprised. Because up to this point, all the troll stories always had a multi-head troll.
More of the Scandinavian and Germanic trolls versus the Icelandic trolls. And so he definitely, just to kind of talk about the trolls and move to them, he used the mostly from Icelandic type trolls, but he also got a lot of stories from the Scandinavian and Germanic trolls too, where the Icelandic trolls are a bit more whimsical versus the more Eastern European trolls, where those trolls, they're just kind of pure evil and they like to eat children is what they are all about.
I actually
And
watched or listened to another podcast that does some troll stuff, and it's always interesting because like part of it relies a lot on like how dumb the trolls are. Like I was trying to figure out like because we talked about I think we talked about like that hobbits I think are supposed to be are they British or Irish? Like
I think
British.
they're British.
British.
right.
Yeah,
So
they're
like I was trying to figure out I
they're
was like
countryside British. Yeah.
right. So I was trying to figure out based off like the and I am not an expert on accents. But I was trying to figure out with the accent he picked for the trolls what these trolls are supposed to represent in like
Cockney.
British society. What is it?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up
Yeah,
in a minute, but I'll talk about it now.
it's Cockney.
So it's a Cockney accent, and it's in Tolkien's time. The accent is really associated with lower education, more working class people that were, again, considered just uneducated and just miners and workmen. And that's actually where we see our first taste of some literary criticism in Tolkien in The Hobbit, is that because of the way that he portrays them as Cockney and complaining about about mutton yesterday, mutton today, and all that, like only having the same thing to eat and being boring with it. There is some modern day criticism that there was classism in that portrayal, where they were portrayed as undereducated working class compared to the more polite and cultured society of the hobbits, and slightly less so the dwarves. So I was wondering what you guys might would think about that literary criticism. Would you guys agree with that? Or
I just looked up what the Ted Lasso character accents are so I could figure out what Cockney specifically is. And according to Reddit, it's Roy Kent. So I don't know if that like I don't know if I just kind of associate it not with I guess when I was reading the accent, but I'm not British, so like I wasn't associating it with like lower class. I was kind of imagining them like when I think of trolls, I think of them being made out of like the mountain, like or made out of stone. So like I always associate it like being harder to talk. And like that's just my own like bias with trolls, I guess. So like I was just kind of associating it more as them being like other or like magical creatures. And so like and usually in stories if the character can talk, I would say it has some level of intelligence, although clearly they're not. I don't know. They're all kind of dumb in the story.
What's interesting is one reason why Tolkien decided they couldn't talk for the Lord of the Rings is because he was trying to come up with a way of why some humanoids have souls and some doesn't. And that's how he decided to show the ones that don't have souls, is that they couldn't speak.
Well, he runs into that. Yeah, because that's Tolkien's Catholicism coming through, where being able to think and speak and articulate is directly correlated to having a soul. And there's a lot of literary study about that, where with the trolls, he makes that that fix of just the trolls don't talk, but he still had that problem with the orcs and the goblins as well, where they are.
Sorry to interrupt, but that criticism, the criticism that he got about it being like making fun of lower class people, was Tolkien aware of that criticism when he made these changes in Lord of the Rings? Like, did he just be like, fine, they won't talk to like get rid of it?
Well, no,
not sure. I don't know about modern criticism for it. I don't know if he got criticism at the time of publishing or directly after. Right. I actually don't know that.
Yeah, because everything I've seen about where the criticism starts doesn't start until the 80s.
Right. Really. Yeah, I saw it early 2000s.
Yeah. So,
but Tolkien would have been aware of those different types of acts, especially in his day, when he was living in England, there was definitely classism problems, but I
Well,
personally don't think that.
Sorry, I would also assume as a linguist himself that he would use language to denote like so much about each character too.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
Right.
it does feel like that
No.
would be intentional, not necessarily that he's trying to make a statement about classism or whatever, but I think there's probably like some kind of statement about each character through the language that they do use.
Yeah. So I read something many years ago. I looked really hard to try to find it again so I could cite it. But I remember reading one time that the reason the trolls' names are William, Bert, and Tom is because those were the three male names most used in Cockney area and in Essex and in the working
Yeah, that's part of the
class.
criticism too, is they're very working class names. But actually,
What were you going to call him, Belvedere? I mean, really?
I actually have my own theory about this though. So I just thought about this because just the other day Robert and I were talking about how anti-industrial Tolkien was. And the Cockney accent during Tolkien's time is really associated with like the inner city and with industrial workers. And in The Lord of the Rings, we see industry as part of evil, where the
Right.
industrial plants and stuff that like knock down nature is part of the evil, and they do, and like the industrial complex literally produces the even more evil and terrible orcs.
Well, I was just
And
thinking about that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no,
I was
Go
just
ahead, go
thinking
ahead.
about like his stance of environmentalism and even what you were saying about how he justified the trolls not speaking in the later books was because of the volcano, or not, I guess, turning to stone in the later books was because the volcano like blacks out the sun so that they're not as um impacted by it, and how that is also like a form of evil because it's blocking out the natural sunlight and everything. I mean,
oh
you
yeah,
see a lot of the environmental things, even with like the Ents in the later books
oh yeah,
and
it's
everything.
not
Like,
subtle.
no, but I love it as a fellow environmentalist.
Yeah, so I doubt that he had that in mind when he did these
Hmm.
trolls at this time, like being like part of that industrial evil complex. But I can see maybe subconsciously that's what he was thinking, is like, because he also blamed the Industrial Revolution for dumbing down people. He thought that it was not conducive to promoting education, just churning out workers.
So because
And he was
Not
very
wrong.
pro-education as well.
right,
Makes sense for a professor.
Although I
Oh,
loved hearing
it's
about, I
fine.
can't remember if I talked Diana about Wynne Jones and how she was like, yeah, I think I was the like lecturing, and he really just bane of his existence because I kept showing up to his lecture.
Yes,
Like he was
that is
purposely
true.
really
Also
boring,
makes
but I
sense
still
for a
wanted to hear him
professor.
talk. And when I read The Hobbit, it really
Average
reminds
professor.
me of
It's
reading
like,
like
I don't
Howl's
want to
Moving
teach. I just want to
Castle, and I can
research.
see
the
like how
very
she was
fact
influenced by him
that while he was
directly, like
grading
much more than
papers, he got
like I know there's people
bored
that try to
and
rip
took
off Tolkien,
a piece
but
of
you can see where
paper
she was
that
clearly actively
part of
like taught by
somebody's
him
thesis
when you
was
look at how
written
she like
on,
sets up the
flipped it over to
story.
the back, and that's where he
So that's been
started
really fun
writing
for
this
me when I've
book.
been going through this.
That's
That's
hilarious.
something really
Yeah, that's
interesting, because you
fantastic. I mean,
mentioned
I think I brought,
her and
again,
Hell's
I'm
Moving
sorry if I,
Castle
because we're
before,
redoing this
and I feel
episode, but
like
like
whenever you see the criticisms of people trying to be like Tolkien, you kind of see the more epics like Lord of the Rings, but I never really thought about inspiration from The Hobbit before and being more whimsical. That's really interesting.
I think it's just a way of like talking about fantasy, because like for me with fantasy, like I don't necessarily love, and I know Tolkien does this all the time in Lord of the Rings, but like where you overly explain something, because I'm like, it's magic, there are dragons, there are trolls, you don't have to tell me, like I'll believe you, I'm already reading, I'm convinced. And so I think so much of what can make the story more real is stopping for tea, is having like, a cat curl up at your feet or something like that while you're trying to figure out a solution, because it brings like real life aspects, and it just feels like you're going through the journey as if you were really in that world. And I think that's some of the whimsy aspects, and you see in Howl's Moving Castle and The Hobbit, which is like, they're just these people thrown into these circumstances, but there's all this other crazy stuff going on, but they're not gonna like overly explain it because it is real. Like it feels very real the way that he describes, like he describes everything happening as in a very matter of fact way.
Mhm.
Like I think Robert mentioned something about like it almost seeming like a transcript of like what's happening of like, you know, this troll said this and then this one said this and like, you know, so it's been interesting seeing that in another author style.
Mhm.
And then the whole so I want to go on talking about trolls unless everyone's got something else to add about what we just was talking about.
Can we go
No,
back to
go
their
ahead.
influences?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to finish up the trolls before I forgot.
Sweet, keep doing the rabbit holes.
So the whole idea of trolls turning into stone when the sun comes up comes from a Norse myth where uh, Thor, of all people, is keeping the dwarf Alvis busy talking until the sun comes up. So,
Mhm.
uh, and and also there's a little bit of this type of story in the oh, I forgot to write down the author's name, but it's called the Expert Huntsman. It's from 1815. It's very reminiscent of that story where this whole thing about them crawling out one by one
Yeah,
and just, you know, it seems like they lost all common sense.
none. No common sense to be found.
So,
But that's trolls turning into stone in the sun. You can find a couple stories, but it is not common. So I do think that is something really clever that Tolkien like kind of mixed and matched some of those influences. But I want to like the thing that they have Gandalf says right as the sun is coming up, I think shows how much of a wordsmith that Tolkien is and how much of a drama queen Gandalf is or go back to the stuff mountains are made of. And I really like that turn of phrase in itself. But I also love, like, just imagining Gandalf being so dramatic. And I just love, like, even just imagining it in my head, I enjoy it.
but the whole thing with Gondorf just suddenly not there and then suddenly shows up. Talk about, you know, I mean, the absent-minded professor, you know? Oh yeah,
Totally. That
I was supposed to be showing people how to get somewhere. I was like,
well, and also that nobody notices that he's like they're like he laughed the hardest, he was around the most, he's like the most treasured member of their party, but nobody notices when he just dips out.
yeah,
They're all
and
high.
Right.
I'm telling you.
and he
It's
also
so
ate the
hilarious.
most.
He's also the
Yeah, he
Yeah.
tallest.
ate the most.
I think I have to
Yeah, it's not
wonder
until they
like what
need
he
him that he's
thought.
gone, that they notice he's gone.
I feel like
Yeah.
it's a way to create drama though, because like Gandalf's like all
Mhm.
powerful, and if he's actually there and present and sober, like this journey is going to be over real quick. But like he wants to bring
Yeah.
up the thrill of it, so every couple of minutes Gandalf has to kind of get confused and wander off.
Again, I disagree.
Again, pipeweed.
Yeah, disagree with it.
Don't
I
do drugs,
think
kids. You can hurt your Hobbit friends.
that is very true. See, I think that Gandalf, he because I love how he berates them when he gets back, where he's like, I
I would
cannot leave you
too.
alone for 5 minutes. Because they're like, where did you go? And he's like, I thought you guys had it handled. So I went up ahead to see if there was any more trouble. But no, it wasn't until I looked behind that I saw the trouble found you. And just, I think it's so funny that he's like, I completely overestimated your common sense and abilities. I cannot leave you alone.
Also, shout out to Bilbo for not like immediately turning back and being like, yo, y'all, there's trolls. Let's go. Like he decides like this is the first time I'm gonna steal, is like I'm by myself and there's three giant trolls. Like I don't know what his game plan was right there.
There
It
was
gives,
none. He just
there
had to
wasn't.
prove that he's part of this party.
If he wants to
Yeah.
practice stealing, he should steal from the dwarves. Like presumably they're not gonna hurt him. So he should just practice pickpocketing.
Well, I
Right.
just love it's almost like little kid attitude of, oh my gosh, I like said I could do this thing. I better do this thing. And then does it in the absolute worst possible way.
It really gives, I lied on my resume and now I'm expected to do the thing.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right.
It's like, yes, I speak German.
What did you guys think about the key aspect? Because like I think it's kind of funny that the trolls are like kind of dumb. I mean, everybody's kind of, I've said that before, everybody's kind of dumb, but like they just, he's like, Bill was like, hey, I found this little key that like fits in my hand. Like, where did the trolls even keep the key? Like, I also love the idea of there just being like a giant door in the side of the mountain that you can open up with like a tiny key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how the door is not well hidden, but the trolls think it is. But because to them, it's like to them it's tiny, and they're just like it's gonna be it's perfect for us, so it'll be the same for other things.
What do you think of like the fact that they find, because like this is the one part like I'm kind of laughing about where like there seems to be a lot of convenient things that happen. I'm doing air quotes right now, where like they end up finding these really cool weapons, and like those weapons are later used in Lord of the Rings. So like that's kind of
Yeah.
convenient. Like what was his idea by just having them and then the very start of the story find these really really powerful swords that get used forever.
I mean, it's very Norse. It is very Norse saga where where they really introduce powerful weapons and important weapons with names and artifacts at the beginning, and then like having it throughout the story, as well as there's in the Norse sagas, it's very much these important artifacts will find the people they're meant for. And you see that with the ring. In the Lord of the Rings, when you learn a little bit more how Gollum gets the ring, and there's kind of a theory that it's like the ring tried to attract Gollum on purpose, because it realized that he had more greed than the other people around, and his greed would snatch up the ring and the ring would be able to use him. And so we see that very prevalent. I'm not going to say that word again.
You didn't say it the first time.
That's fair. But yeah, we see it in there. So there's this theory in and also in like Arthurian legend with King Arthur, that like the people that like you're gonna get the artifact early, but the artifact found and chose you
I
because
feel
you're
like
worthy.
for this it's a little more interesting because like with Arthur, like he still goes through trials and he still like proves he's the one that picks it, like he pulls it out of the stone. And like
Right.
I've also heard like Lady of the Lake and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was
Like I just
thinking
think
that
it's kind of,
too.
I think it's funny where like they stumble into this cave, they raid it, they take everything they think is nice, and then like you later find out that they're incredibly powerful. And like I kind of like that more, but it's such a it's such a reversal of expectations because like all I've seen
Yeah.
is like these epic journeys to find, and you earn the right to use like this magical weapon, and they're finding theirs in chapter 2. So I just thought that was kind of fun.
Right.
But it is reminiscent of many past DMs I've known who don't think about what it is that we find as treasure. They just used a random road chart. It's like, okay, so why do these people who can't read, and why do golems who can't read and can't write and probably would have already used the paper to start fires with, have a tomb with 8th level magic user spells in it?
Mm-hmm. Like you giving your players a magic broom and then regretting it immediately.
Yep.
I also like have thoughts on them deciding to bury the treasure rather than just use the locked cave they have access to with the key. Like how deep did they bury it? Like what if there's a mudslide? Like they could just lose their treasure.
Well,
I
I
always
always
have
thought,
doubts on their ability to find their way back here.
Yeah.
well, I was thinking about that too. Like they do choose to bury their treasure rather than just use that. And I'm almost wondering if because like the trolls thought it was so well hidden and they were like, it's pretty freaking obvious. Like, let's not
That's fair.
leave treasure for other people to find. Like, I almost wonder if that was part of the thinking, that we'll hide it in a
Mhm.
safe place that will remember.
Don't they bury it next to
Yeah.
the path? Like, is
Yeah,
it
I
like,
think so.
or is it in the middle of the woods?
It's very much
It's
like
next to the stream where they would remember. But the thing that like I totally missed this until I think Amy pointed it out at one point that they use magic as well to protect it, where they can remember it and get to it with magic, but they use this dwarf magic to protect their treasure. And we hear a little bit about magic in the first chapter when they're talking about the magic that the dwarves did with metal and jewels. But this is like the last time you hear about the dwarf magic. There's no dwarf magic in Lord of the Rings.
Do the dwarves not use their magic to not get captured or put in a sack and almost roasted? Because like that's what I would use my magic.
Yeah, see
well,
that.
no,
I
they
mean,
just use it to not start fires.
I'm just assuming that the magic is just to protect their gold because
Yeah.
dwarves are, they are very protective of their items and their things.
Well, and for people who dig it up,
Mhm.
and it's almost natural for them to bury it because they don't think anybody else will take the time to
To dig
dig.
it. Yeah, that's true too. But yeah, I'm just more upset that it's like we have this cool mention of this magic. I want to know more. Tolkien, why does he take 30 pages to explain a bush, but the things that you really want to like
It
really
depends, like,
understand?
what question his child would not stop asking him is what I'm gonna go with. Is that the child
That
wanted to know about the
is
bush,
valid.
Well,
not
actually,
the dwarf
It's all
magic.
Christopher's fault.
well, no, all of his children at one point or another in interviews or in speeches have said that this was their favorite chapter in the book.
Yes, I
Really?
do. I do remember hearing that.
Yeah.
So it's downhill
That's
from
so
here.
cute.
Well, I mean, it's also the first time we have conflict, the first time we get to see Bilbo fail, first time we get to see the dwarves fail.
I think we ever saw them succeed.
Yeah. I mean, they got their swords, they got the cave, they conveniently found the key. I got honestly, like, it's funny to me because like there's a part of my lizard brain that's like annoyed that they're conveniently finding stuff, but I'm also loving it. Like, they're just it's very, like I said, it's very whimsical. It's very like, you know, if you were telling a story, this is just the beginning. Like, there's clearly more crazy stuff that's going to happen going down the road, and this is how it's starting off: is them almost getting eaten by trolls and finding a bunch of weapons in a cave, and it's very fun. So I'm really enjoying this.
I
Yeah,
also
kind
feel
of
like
like
it gives you like people to root for. Like you want to see them get better. You want to see them
Yes.
start to succeed. And like you're building up like, they're the underdogs almost because
Oh
they're so
yeah.
bad at
yeah,
everything.
That's a good point. This is
exactly.
a great way to show growth. Hopefully they
Yeah.
get
Mhm.
better. I have
Yeah,
Like
I
low
really do hope
expectations
they get
now.
better at everything.
yeah, but I kind of like how it's like it's like it kind of shows like yeah, there's danger ahead, but there's great rewards if you can get past it.
Yeah. And but us, for some reason, y'all talking about this reminded me of a story Alex told us about on their trip,
Okay.
where the guy that they picked up and the dog that they picked up, they're trying to find. It's a 15-minute story, so I'm not going to.
Story that involves Alex almost getting shanked over a dog.
Oh
And
gosh.
but this guy keeps, he keeps pulling out this hunting knife and playing with it and so forth like that.
This complete stranger that Alex has let into the car to help a dog that is neither of theirs.
And as Alex is finishing the story, he goes, "Yes." And it was this knife. And he slams the knife down in the middle of the dining room table with us, my brother, my dad. And that's how he
Miss dinner.
Yeah.
Christmas dinner, and he just slams the knife down. And he says later he was waiting for this moment.
Yeah, he's been holding
Oh
on
my
that knife,
God.
holding this story. Yeah.
Because the guy left it in his car after they found what someone claimed might be their dog.
Well, I guess it's good that the dog was found without the knife also on the person that said they found the dog.
No, Alex.
Okay, the short version is Alex saw a dog on the side of the road with no one around. And so he was trying to help it. As he was doing it, a strange man with many knives comes out of the woods.
No, just one knife. Just one big knife.
One big knife. Just comes out of the woods. He's like, "Is this your dog?" And he goes, "No, but I think I know who it is." So Alex just puts them both in the car. Very long story short, they find someone who's like, "Yeah, I think this is my dog," and Alex just lets them both out and leaves.
But what's what's really funny is as the guy's climbing the car with Alex. Alex looks at Carly and says, "If I'm not back in an hour, call the police." And
his wife goes,
"No, 30 minutes. You have 30 minutes."
Carly is regretting marrying into the Lewis clan.
Oh well, that's our problem.
Yeah.
He loves
that knife now.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in chapter 2 you guys want to talk about?
Yeah.
So
it's your fault there.
Yeah. But I want to go. I want to go back to the whole thing with Gandalf tricking them to keep arguing. That also goes back to an older story. It's a Grimm's tale called The Brave Little Tailor, which was published in 1812. And it's almost exactly what the Brave Little Tailor does is get people arguing until time runs out for stuff. So
it gives me that scene. Oh, I can make this reference and someone else will understand it. It gives me that scene from Mean Girls where they're like tricking each other on the phone.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's a pretty common trope too, right? Like that you keep them arguing until, like, don't they do it in Hocus Pocus too? Like they keep the witches arguing until the sun comes up. Like I feel like it's it's used quite frequently.
But I feel like at least all the times I've seen it, it's been done really well. And I think it's done so well in this chapter.
I definitely think it's like a marker of like, I guess, intelligence. Like it's showing that Gandalf just kind of has much more of a control of any situation going on too, not just like magically, because like obviously he can blow people up, but like the fact that he can also like trick them mentally, I think kind of adds to his like mystique as a character.
I feel like it also adds to just him loving the drama because, yeah, he could have easily defeated them and fought them and blown them up. But no, he chose to mentally torture them.
I mean, I think it's a little bit easier if you know they're turning to stone.
Yeah. I'm sorry, say that again.
I think it's a little easier to just, if you know they're going to turn to stone, daylight. Maybe he wanted them to hang out in the sack for a little bit longer and think about what they did. Like maybe that's part of what's going on.
That tracks.
That's actually what I was getting ready to say.
That's so funny. Great minds.
Yeah, because the dwarves. That is another thing I want to mention is how the dwarves, they have the audacity. First, they interview and interrogate Bilbo like 3 times to get his story because of Bilbo not being able to come back and warn them. And then they have the sheer audacity to like be like, Gandalf, why weren't you here? Why did you do this? And Gandalf's like, you mean instead of going one by one into a trap without changing a thing?
Yeah.
It's like,
did they question Bilbo too? Like, I can't remember if they. I feel like the dwarves are very quick to like blame somebody else.
Yeah,
their
they were upset at Bilbo, and then they were upset at Gandalf, and Gandalf's like, glass house, guys, glass house.
I was going to ask Amy if she's had anything because we've kind of been talking over her every time she's trying to say something.
No worries. No, I think you guys have covered it all. I can't think of anything else I wanted to add.
Yeah. Well,
Evie was about to say something though when you cut her off. We're still figuring this out, guys.
No, it's okay. I was just saying, like, the only other thing that I would want to comment on, because I do think that we've been talking about chapter 2 for a really long time, is I thought it was interesting that, like, one of them wanted to keep Bilbo as, like, a pet. Where, like, he was like, oh my god, it's so cute, we can't kill it. And the other ones were like, I'm so hungry, we're gonna eat it.
That is really funny.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And also, what's interesting is, so when they asked Gandalf where he was talking to friends from Rivendell.
Hmm.
One is the name of Elrond.
Yeah.
That doesn't
decide how much we're gonna give away.
No, that doesn't show up until the 1967 edition.
Oh, that's right.
There's no mention of Rivendell previous editions.
Yeah, they don't. He doesn't name this Rivendell in this, and then later stuff when he knows about after he's written Lord of the Rings, he kind of adds some names in or makes the names consistent. That is something that does happen in future chapters. So stop trying to spoil stuff. It's inherited.
But it's not spoiling. That's what he said in the book.
Okay.
If they're reading along, they would have seen it already.
But yes, that made me forget the thing that I was going to say. Made me.
Are we doing predictions for the next chapter?
Yes. Okay, let's go ahead and do it. So the next chapter is called A Short Rest.
It's called A Short Rest?
A short rest.
The next chapter 3 is A Short Rest. Now I know Evie at least already read it, but do you remember and then Amy, if you have predictions, but with reading it, do you remember like what you thought might be happening next, what the chapter title might mean, or general predictions?
I definitely have zero recollection of reading this book. Typically the part that I remember the most from like the movies and from like any recollection is always the scene with the trolls. And pretty much after that, I remember nothing. So when I think of like A Short Rest, I think that it's kind of similar to in D&D. When you get a long rest, you like reset everything. And so the fact that they're only having a short rest, I'm assuming they get cut off in the middle of their rest and they don't get to like go back to full health. So that's going to be my prediction for the next chapter.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some kind of rest involved. That's my insight into this chapter.
I am going to be really responsible, and I'm going to add that. It won't let me add the notes. Okay, there we go. I'm going to actually write those down because I never wrote down my predictions and can never remember. So I'm going to write the predictions down so we can remember for the next recording.
Did he decide his chapter titles or did somebody else? Like, I'm wondering if I've always wondered why people choose the chapter titles they decide.
He did choose all of the chapter titles for The Hobbit and then for the Lord of the Rings when he wrote it. And that's kind of one of the reasons I started doing the predictions with Lord of the Rings is sometimes the titles were really out there and it's just like, what could this possibly mean?
Jetsam and Flotsam.
If you knew what those were. I didn't. I'm never living it down.
Nope.
All right. Well, I was responsible and I wrote down predictions, unlike, our last 6 seasons.
Proud of you. You're just like Bilbo. You're learning your ways.
That's right.
Eventually.
Because we're all just hobbits.
I certainly would much rather be a hobbit if I had to pick.
I would be. I'm so torn between hobbit and dwarf, honestly.
Oh, I've always known that I would be an elf.
I don't know the difference enough between is it races? What's the PC way?
Yeah, they're considered different races.
I don't know. So far I really vibe with the whole idea of you just eat and have tea all day and just kind of vibe. I mean,
7 meals a day sounds good to me.
All power.
Yeah.
to
I just
feel
like
some
the idea
magic.
of wearing really flowy clothing and having like, omnipotent powers or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean
Seems
having
cool.
having powers would be cool. I'm not sure if I'd want
I
hairy
just
feet.
I just want to I love the Hobbit of just kind of chilling, but I also love dwarves in their like being able to be like master craftsmen as well as being able to hit people with a big hammer.
They also seem like master dumbasses though, because they did all get captured by a troll. Although knowing you, I'm sorry, I kind of see that could happen.
Yeah, that's fair. It's totally fair. I am resigned to being a satyr, so it's okay. Um, Lord of the Rings, I'm gonna say in Lord of the Rings, Gimli is extremely talented. Like Gimli is
Hmm.
considered like the best of the best when it comes to like being like part of the fellowship, and he's considered an extremely skilled warrior. And oh my god, I'm forgetting which one it is. I think it's Balin is his dad. No, it was Gimli, so it's something that rhymes with Gimli. I don't remember which one is his dad is, but I'm assuming that, I mean, he had to have some sort of training to be that good versus these guys. So something had to happen in between.
It's a good prediction for the future.
Golan.
Golan, Gimli, Golan. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I'll tell you, these names are a dyslexic's nightmare, which is what I
Oh
have to
yeah.
go through.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the first time I read this book, it's like, why do we have so many names that rhyme and start with the same letters?
No,
When
it's
so
crazy.
So I wasn't diagnosed with being dyslexic until I was in college, but I very vividly remember reading these books and I never said the names. The only names I knew were Bilbo, Gandalf, and Thorin. And I would see the names, but I wouldn't think the names. I would be like, those three, those two, where I saw patterns where Tolkien kind of writes like mentions like three of them at a time doing something or another. So I always just like, oh, if this person talks, he's part of this group of three or that group of two.
I think that'll be
Um,
interesting for me as I go through the story more, because right now I kind of just like, other than Thorin, I kind of associate all the dwarves as like basically the same character. Like I haven't
I
really mentally
totally,
separated them. So
I
yeah,
totally agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's very difficult to
don't
tell
know.
any of them apart.
I don't remember if I mentioned this last episode, so I'll mention it real fast here that in the original manuscript, because we talked about how the manuscripts have been completely lost now, but in the original manuscript, Tolkien did have them more individual and had them more like able to distinguish one from the other. But the publisher was like, dude, it's too much to keep track of. We need to simplify it. So a lot of the speaking roles were condensed to just one or two different characters. And but Tolkien went out of his way that in the book, at least one person is mentioned doing something individually at one time, like so and so looked this way or said this or that. So he does do it
Gotcha.
at least once for each dwarf in the book, but for the most part, he took it all out because it was like he agreed it was too confusing for kids to follow.
I was trying to type something on my phone and it's listening to you instead.
Lovely.
As it should be. Did you guys have anything else?
I think I'm good.
I think I'm good too. Should we sign out?
Yeah, we didn't discuss how to do it. Let's just do it in the same order that we started.
Okie
So
dokie.
I've been Robert.
I've been Amy.
I'm Evie.
And I'm Evelyn. And you've been listening to Tolkien About It.
Yay!
Bye.